Before Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, or Sandra Bland, there was Oscar Grant. The current movement against police terror and for accountability and justice can trace its first iterations to this moment, when Oscar Grant was killed by a Bay Area rapid transit police officer on January 1st, 2009. Captured on numerous digital devices, Oscar's death would be the first murder prosecution of an on-duty Bay Area police officer. Before that would occur, however, Oscar would be murdered in the media and in the court system. It was a triple murder. No doubt, the murders of Oscar Grant tells this story.
"'Tis woman's strongest vindication for speaking that the world needs to hear her voice." Anna Julia Cooper wrote those words in 1892. You would think she's speaking about today. White supremacy and patriarchy, by definition, belittles and ignores the voices of Black women. Some of Us Are Brave, a Black woman's radio program, was a corrective to that, centering and airing the voices, views, and experiences of Black women, documenting them and capturing moments in time. The program aired on Pacifica Radio for almost a decade. Many of those voices have been preserved here, and Some of Us Are Brave, interviews and conversations with sisters on life, art, and struggle. Edited by Thandisizwe Chimurenga.
All right, y'all. It is I, Thandisizwe Chimurenga, host of Rootwork here on Black Liberation Media, coming to you on the Sunday afternoon/evening, live and direct from the void. Once again, from the void. I am incognita, but yeah, y'all don't need to know all of that. What you need to do is pay attention to the words that's about to come out of my mouth. You don't need to see my lovely face, simply my melodious voice. That's all you need to be concerned with today, as we are in week 3 or episode 3, Sunday number 3 of the Black August Study and Struggle series, reading from Sanyika Shakur's book, Stand Up, Struggle Forward, and Safiya Bukhari's book, The War Before. Usually when we have, during Black August, we have collective study. And most study groups are really study and discussion groups. We don't really have a lot of discussion here. But, I wanted to do something. And we talk so much about the literacy crisis amongst our people, not just our people, but in the U.S. If we're on social media any length of time, we know there's a literacy crisis. We need to read more. We need to study more. We need to discuss more. But I just thought as one little teeny tiny thing I could do, my personal commitment during Black August is to read more. I need to double up on my reading. And I thought I would bring it here to Rootwork on Black Liberation Media. I will read to some of y'all because, as I said, out here in these social media streets, it's a lot going on. It's some people that's just putting the camera on them and they just ranting and raving. I said, well, I can at least offer something of substance. And that's what I'm here to do today with reading from these two works from these two great revolutionary New Africans, Sanyika Shakur and Safiya Bukhari. Now, before we get into today's reading, I want to remind you to like, to share, and to subscribe. Like the video now before you forget. Share the link. Subscribe to Black Liberation Media. Make sure that you sign up for I want to call it Patreon. Is that like Patron? Patreon. become a member to financially sustain this channel. Subscribe to the channel. Also, subscribe to my personal Rootwork channel. And before I forget, because I have been forgetting as of late, I want to send a shout out to Brittany, Mike Mack, Mac Clubbin, and Akil. Thank you so much for your financial support of Rootwork. A sister appreciates y'all. All right, so now, again, this is Black August, and we are reading from Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur and Safiya Bukhari, The War Before. I'm going to start off with Safiya this week because hadn't been able to give her the time and attention the last couple of weeks because reading from Sanyika, I think I overestimated or underestimated how long it would take to read, but also Safiya has a lot of shorter pieces. Sanyika has a few pieces that are very long. So, and last week, I think it was last week or maybe it was the week before, Sanyika's piece on not resolving, I'm sorry, the class antagonisms and contradictions within the Black movement. I thought that was a very, very eloquent and informative chapter. Today's chapters, and I'm going to try to get to two of them, should also be extremely informative. And this is the chapter from Safiya Bukhari, Enemies and Friends, Resolving Contradictions. Now, and again, I try to, no, that's not going to do it. Try to put it on the screen for you so that you can read along also. Yeah, that might not work. Every week I go through this, trying to figure out the bestest way that I can get this done. And it doesn't always work. So, yeah, I tried to have it on the screen. I don't think that's going to work. I think what I'm going to have to do, or what I did last time, if I can remember what I did last time. No. Oh my goodness. There we go. Yeah, I believe what I did last time was share the screen. So instead of, yeah, let's do that. Let's just do that and let us just share the screen. And that way you can tell if I'm lying or not. No, I'm just playing. I am not lying. Yeah, I think that if you're unable, if you don't have a copy of your, if you don't have a PDF, which is available out there in the void for free, if you don't have a copy of the book, and if you're not able to enlarge the screen on your own, then you should be able to see this. You should be able to. Let us see, shall we? Okay. All right. I apologize for all of this stuff over here up top. But, you know, hey, we're going to make it do what it do. That's one thing for sure. We're going to make it do what it do. All right. Chapter 5 of Safiya Bukhari's The War Before. Enemies and Friends, Resolving Contradictions. This is the introductory note by the editor, Laura Whitehorn. Do y'all know? Okay, in a nutshell, Laura Whitehorn is a white anti-imperialist feminist comrade in the struggle. She and several other white anti-imperialist comrades, I believe his name is Tim Blanc. Tim Blanc, Dr. Alan Berkman, Laura Whitehorn, Susan Rosenberg, Linda Evans, Kathy Boudin at one point, Marilyn Buck. All of these folks were principled material supporters, comrades in Black and Puerto Rican liberation movements, did serious time in prison. And that's how, working together on the East Coast, everyone knew one another. And after Safiya passed, it was Laura Whitehorn who got this book published. She edited it. So in her introduction to this essay, she states, "It is not clear exactly when this essay was written, probably sometime in the late 1980s or early 1990s. During those years, people who had been in any of the radical organizations targeted by COINTELPRO tried to reconstruct relationships and create a basis for continuing to do political work together. This essay is one of Safiya's many attempts to contribute to that process, to examine what she sees as her own weaknesses in working with others, and to establish some firm foundation for encouraging people to unite to support the comrades left in prison. Since one of those people, Geronimo Pratt or Geronimo Jijaga, had been unable to prove his innocence, partly because of the rancor among some former Panthers, these questions had particular significance for Safiya's work." Now, let me go real quick, real quick. Hold on for me. The name of Safiya's book, The War Before, the true life story of becoming a Black Panther, keeping the faith in prison, and fighting for those left behind. That last sentence, Safiya Bukhari was absolutely committed to fighting on behalf of her Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army comrades who remained in prison. When she was on the streets, when she was in prison, when she got out of prison, she ate, slept, worked to bring them home, even being accused sometimes of helping to organize escapes from prison. She is a co-founder of the Jericho Amnesty Movement for political prisoners. So that is who Safiya Bukhari was and is. Regarding Geronimo Jijaga Pratt, Minister of Defense here in Los Angeles, Southern California branch of the Black Panther Party under Bunchy Carter's leadership. In 1969, Geronimo was accused of the murder of a woman in Santa Monica on a tennis court. He was convicted of that murder and he was sent to prison. Geronimo always maintained his innocence. He stated on the night in question that this happened, "I was in the Bay Area at a Panther leadership meeting." Geronimo had a car. I don't remember the make of the car, but it became like a Panther car, community car. If somebody needed to use the ride, they had access to the ride, they could use the ride. That ride was being driven by whoever committed this murder. That is what, excuse me, led them to Geronimo Jijaga. A pig, an informant, a traitor to the people by the name of Julius Butler, or Julio Butler, who was given safe harbor for many years here in Los Angeles by First AME Church. We will never, ever let them live that down. We will always mention that they harbored this demon. Anyway, he was outed as an informant, as a police informant. He wrote a letter stating that Geronimo had confessed to him of this killing. He put that letter in an envelope and said, "Only open in the case of my death." And he gave it to this cop. I'm not sure if he gave it to the cop because they were cop friends or he was a Panther. I don't know what happened, but he gave it to the cop. And of course, the cop opened it before anything happened to Julius Butler. This is how Geronimo gets convicted. At the time of this trial in the late 60s, early 70s, when Geronimo goes on trial, one of his attorneys was Johnny Cochran. And Geronimo's legal team said, well, you all got the proof because you had us under surveillance, right? We fast forward a few years. A white FBI agent by the name of Wesley Swearingen, like swearing, E-N, Wesley Swearingen, he states, well, I saw the FBI logs, the wiretap logs. A phone, because they were under surveillance. A phone rings at the location of this meeting. Somebody says, can I speak to G? That's Geronimo. Somebody says, yeah, hold on, G. And G comes and answers the phone. All of that was documented in the FBI wiretap logs, which for whatever reason had mysteriously disappeared during Geronimo's original trial. Now, this original trial took place, I think Geronimo was convicted in 1970. 1971 is the official quote-unquote split of the Panthers. I could be kind of shaky on the date of Geronimo's conviction. My point throughout all of this, however, is that for the sake of expediency, I'm going to boil it down to there was the East Coast faction and the West Coast faction. The East Coast faction, many people say that was the Eldridge faction. West Coast, that was the Huey faction. People in Los Angeles, many of the Southern California branch, Geronimo, etc., aligned with Eldridge Cleaver. They were persona non grata under the leadership in the faction of Huey P. Newton, to the point that he put out, if there were trials happening, you are not to testify on behalf. You are not to attend these trials. You are not to support these people, etc., and so on. Kathleen Cleaver, who was married to Eldridge, so obviously she was part of the faction that got put out. Kathleen Cleaver, to my knowledge, was the only Panther who testified that Geronimo was in the Bay Area at this meeting. In other words, all those other Panthers who had been in attendance, they did not come to Geronimo's assistance because of the directive from Huey Newton at the time there was this split. That was my long ass-winded context to that note, introductory note by the editor, Laura Whitehorn. Coming back over here. Hey, damn, Hatfield, McCoy. Yeah, I'm checking the chat. Y'all still with me? All right, let's get into it. Over the past several years, the movement, or what is left of it, has been bogged down in a quagmire of infighting, backstabbing, manipulation, and one-upmanship. Those of us in the movement don't see it this way, but to the people outside looking in, those we are attempting to organize, this is what appears to be happening. We see ourselves as being involved in concrete political work. Depending on what political formation we belong to, we consider ourselves the sole standard bearers of revolutionary principles, the ones with the correct path, and everyone else who is not down with us is incorrect, fools, or napes. If we were able to take a step back to look at the situation objectively, we would get a different view. The first thing that you recognize from that perspective is that there's a big world out there, and the quote movement, end quote, is very small. Not only is the movement small, but it's an extremely incestuous bunch of people. I don't mean that blood relatives are actually indulging in sexual relations. I mean that the movement is so small that it is hard to find someone who has not been party to a relationship, political or sexual, with someone else in the movement. In effect, we're all connected to one another. in some convoluted way. In a very concrete sense, the movement has become like Peyton Place or any other soap opera you see on television. What our grandmama and them call our stories, soap operas. Contradictions between people and organizations usually develop out of personal problems that escalate into political differences. Because the movement is, oh Lord, what are you doing? Because the movement is rife with disorganization and lacks cohesion. People make decisions about whom to work with based on personal relationships. As a result, one might wonder whether we can be taken seriously when we talk about making a revolution in this country. I cannot exclude myself from this criticism because I found myself deciding on occasion to take the easy way out rather than stay and wage struggle to combat these tendencies and build a stronger movement. You going to that program tomorrow night? Who all gonna be there? You going to that book signing? No, I ain't going to that book signing. My own inability to confront the problems and struggle to eradicate counterproductive tendencies within our formations stems from a fear of having my motives misconstrued or of being subject to personal attack. Sometimes it's extremely hard to deal with situations in a principled manner when people call one another comrade but treat each other in a manner that belies the use of that term. Social practice is the criterion for truth. I'm going to say that one more time. Social practice is the criterion for truth. If you talk about people behind their backs, have hidden agendas, or manipulate situations so that certain people are not privy to what's going on, I'm going to come back to that. It makes it hard for people to criticize such activity without fearing retaliation. Now she says, people who are not privy to what's going on, I'm not talking about a need to know situation, right? And I'll be able to go to Safiya's notes at the end of this chapter. The real problem begins with what Mao Zedong called liberalism. In Combat Liberalism, Mao Zedong said liberalism is extremely harmful in a revolutionary collective. It is a corrosive that eats away unity, undermines cohesion, causes apathy, and creates dissension. It robs the revolutionary ranks of compact organization and strict discipline, prevents policies from being carried through, and alienates the party organizations from the masses which the party leads. It is an extremely bad tendency. I have read, sorry y'all, come on now, get out the way. I have read and studied combat liberalism more times than you can shake a stick at. But reading doesn't necessarily mean understanding. And understanding doesn't necessarily mean internalizing. Within the past few months, I have been taking stock of myself and trying to understand what is making it hard for me to make real progress, to engage in constructive criticism, and open myself up to criticism and self-criticism. It wasn't until the past few weeks when I was trying to determine whether it made sense to continue to try and work with certain people that I had to look into myself and recognize that I was again refusing to engage in constructive criticism. I was walking away and allowing a situation to continue without struggling to resolve contradictions. I asked myself, self, how can you talk about taking on the United States government when you're afraid to struggle with a few people? That is the biggest contradiction of them all. Now, for the first time, I understood what Mao Zedong meant when, in a speech before the Chinese Communist Party's National Conference on Propaganda Work on March 12, 1957, he said, quote, "He who is not afraid of death by 1,000 cuts dares to unhorse the emperor." End quote. Whatever is unprincipled, incorrect, and counterproductive about you and your style of work, you have to be willing to subject to the, is it rapier or rapier? Knife of revolutionary criticism if you are serious about creating a revolution. Everything, action or inaction, the way you relate to people you work with, how you deal with the masses, how you deal with your family, how you deal with personal relationships, how you deal with people with whom you disagree, has to be open to criticism and self-criticism. None of us is perfect, but we all claim to want to create a revolution. In order to create this revolution, we must be willing to sublimate our egos for the good of the movement and suffer death of these egos by 1,000 cuts. It is only when we are able to do this that we will truly be able to move forward and create a revolution and win. Give me a sec. Give me a sec. Give me a sec. Okay. Just checking to you. Just checking. Just checking. Look like y'all all right in the chat, so I'm going to keep it up. If we continue to practice liberalism and do not engage in struggle against incorrect views for the sake of unity or progress or, quote, getting the work done properly, end quote, then we will continue to walk away from organizations and groups, creating new groups of 2 and 30. 2 or 30. This practice has permeated the movement and helped to create the sectarian problem we're experiencing today. We cannot organize our communities for revolution if we cannot resolve the contradictions among ourselves. It's not good enough to say we agree to disagree. That usually means that you've decided to go your separate ways and not interfere with each other. If a contradiction is of such magnitude that you cannot work together, even with the knowledge that you're involved in building a revolution, something that requires a coordinated effort between revolutionaries and the masses, something that is highly life-threatening, then you cannot just go your separate ways. There is no separate way in a revolutionary struggle. We're all either in this together or we're working at odds with each other. The sooner we recognize this and begin seriously working to resolve the contradictions among us, the sooner we can seriously begin to build a foundation for revolution. Did I say Tim Blanc? I think his name was David Gilbert. All right, anyway. To simply say that we're going to work together is not enough. It's not enough either. We're all human beings. We all have our own idiosyncrasies. What is necessary is that we stop the liberalism, place all our cards on the table, and hash out our differences. We can no longer afford the luxury of rumor mongering, making unsubstantiated allegations, or harboring ill feelings without airing them. I'm going to say that one again. Harboring ill feelings without airing them. Yeah, you know that brother up in Connecticut. That professor's name is Amilcar. Yeah, he be talking slick about people. I don't like that Negro. But did you say that to him? No, I don't like that Haki Kweli dude either. He said something slick about me one time. Did you say something to him? No. Y'all know I'm just playing, right? I'm just using y'all as examples. The original split within the Black Panther Party in 1971 went down because we practiced liberalism, harbored ill will, believed rumors without investigation, and allowed this to go on until it grew so large that we believed the only way out was fratricide. If we had nipped it in the bud, COINTELPRO would not have been able to do its job. A lot of comrades would not have been killed. Many more would not have ended up in prison for all these years, and countless others would not be members of the class of the walking dead. Only when we lay all our cards on the table, reveal all our heretofore hidden agendas, and determine that we are working on the same agenda will we be capable of waging struggle over disagreements to build a strong, solid organization that will lead us to freedom and liberation. In understanding this, I've come to recognize that everybody does not take this view. For those who do, I would like to offer this view of how to resolve contradictions among the people so we can begin to move forward in the struggle. The first step is to discuss our goals and see whether they are the same, or at least whether they fit with one another. Some people like to say, are we on the same page? What we need to do is find out, are we in the same book, let alone chapter? Anyway, we often assume that because we all say we're involved in a struggle, we mean we're involved in the same struggle with the same objectives and goals. Here's what I mean by that phrase. I believe that nothing short of a revolution will eradicate the racism, capitalism, and imperialism that oppress me and my people, as well as other exploited and oppressed people everywhere. I believe that the capitalist system of this country has to be destroyed and replaced with an economic system built on the premise, quote, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs, end quote. That is, every man, woman, and child contributes to the whole what he or she is capable of contributing, and whether that contribution is highly skilled labor or unskilled labor, each receives from the whole the basic necessities of life, what is necessary for maintaining a humane and dignified existence. Once we have established a commonality of goals, the method we use in resolving contradictions should be determined by a number of factors, chiefly one, whether the contradiction is with our enemy or between friends, and two, what is the desired outcome of the contradiction. Once it has been established that the contradiction is between friends, and for the purpose of this paper, friends is not being used to mean cut, buddy, homie, or pal. Here it is merely a way of saying that the person is not an agent, pig, provocateur, or someone working against the people. So once it's been established that the contradiction is between friends, then the next step is to determine what the desired outcome is. If the contradiction is between friends, then the desired outcome must be to resolve the contradiction in order to move forward. If the allegation is that the person is an agent or enemy of the people, the desired outcome is to resolve the contradiction in order to verify the charge or exonerate the individual. Verify that this person is an agent or exonerate them. Say no, they are not an agent. The method used to resolve the contradiction starts from the premise no investigation, no right to speak. The first order of business is to investigate the allegation, not to spread rumors or vilify the person, but to conduct a thorough, objective investigation of the circumstances that led to the charge. Too often in our movement, as in our everyday lives, we hear rumors about individuals, and without thought for consequences or making any effort to determine the validity of the rumor, we simply pass them on to someone else. On the streets, outside political formations, we're very clear that when we do this, we're indulging in gossip. Within the movement, we talk about COINTELPRO all the time, but don't realize that what we're doing is continuing the pattern of behavior that allowed COINTELPRO to succeed. The object of investigation is to get to the truth. This requires that we enter into the investigation from the point of neutrality. This can best be done by empowering a minimum of 3 people, and that's minimum, to conduct the investigation and arrive at an objective conclusion. We must be objective and give no greater validity to one side than to the other. The axiom is that there are 3 sides to a situation: side 1, side 2, and the truth. In getting to the truth, we must hear all sides of the equation first. Once all sides are heard, if the truth is not easily discerned, then it becomes necessary to continue the investigation by questioning witnesses to the situation. During the course of the investigation, depending upon the nature of the charge, we conduct business as usual. The movement has long talked about people being, quote, tried before the people in a people's court, end of quote. But the theory has far outweighed the practice. The Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, also known as the PG or PGRNA, has gone so far as to elect judges to its people's court. But trying issues of dispute before a people's court is not a working practice. In order for it to be a working practice, we have to begin implementing it. If we are to educate our people on the correct method of resolving contradictions by example, then we can ill afford to continue making allegations, spreading and embellishing them without moving to resolve them. A model for a people's court. I recently engaged in such a dispute. The model that was used to resolve the dispute was a people's tribunal. The person bringing the charges put them on paper. The person the charges were brought against prepared a written response. These were disseminated to all parties involved. A date, time, and place were set for a hearing. Both sides were able to have witnesses present. 3 independent hearing officers, having no involvement in the dispute and trusted by both sides, were chosen, and an odd number of not less than 5 jurists were chosen, also with no involvement in the charges. The hearing officers set the tone and laid out guidelines for the proceeding. The charges were read into the record and tape recorded. Then the person bringing the charges presented her point of view, followed by the reading of the written response to the charges. Next, The person bringing the charges called and questioned her witnesses. The person charged then questioned the witnesses, followed by questions from the hearing officers and jury panel. The witnesses were not allowed to ask any questions. Their part in the proceeding was simply to be witnesses. The proceedings were handled the same way for the person being charged when she presented her witnesses. All the parties involved had agreed to abide by the decision of the court, and they did. This is only a model. It was not perfect, and it is possible that the resolution was accepted and the episode laid to rest for reasons other than the fact that the proceedings were handled in a principled manner. We here in Los Angeles put together an African People's Tribunal back in 2014. It was led by James Simmons, an attorney, member of the longtime worker in the New African Independence Movement, a member of National Conference of Black Lawyers, human rights advocacy. He'd been one of the lawyers for Sekou Odinga at one point. And we put together this tribunal in 2014 over allegations, serious allegations of all manner of mayhem against the leader of an organization called the Black Riders Liberation Party. The documents from that tribunal and even maybe some video are available out here in the world. But this person, known as General Taco, and Taco stands for Take All Capitalists Out, was accused of serious mistreatment and a bunch of other stuff, just misrepresenting the movement, all financial irregularities, all kinds of stuff. He was presented with the charges. He always talked about this is COINTELPRO, I'm being set up. He was given a date and time to face his accusers, to answer these charges. He didn't show up. He did not show up. So this was an attempt for the movement to practice self-determination and do for itself and not call in, quote unquote, the state. A lot of people had a lot of issues with it. That they thought that whatever Taco did in, quote unquote, his organization was his right. And who are we to bring somebody before a tribunal? You know, all of these different things showing that certain people at that particular time were not really ready for self-determination or quote unquote self-governance. Not so much that they didn't want to participate, they didn't want it to occur. But occur it did. And like I said, information on that and those documents are available out here in the void known as the internet. This last paragraph in this chapter: maybe we really haven't identified the true contradiction. I suggest that the real contradiction may be that we really are not about the same thing, the same goals, and some of us are not willing to admit it. Not yet, anyway. Only 4 notes in this chapter. When she referred to napes earlier, napes is a variant of jackanape. Both words mean conceited, and using them is similar to calling someone a jackass. Nape was often used by members of the Black Panther Party. A need-to-know situation. In an attempt to minimize gossip and spreading of information within revolutionary organizations, a standard was employed whereby information was only given to those who needed to know it in order to carry out their work. This was also a practice within clandestine organizations to prevent sensitive information from being exposed. And I think we can add to that, need to know information protects you. If you don't need to know, when the police come and ask, did you know? You can honestly and truly say, no, I did not. In terms of the FBI, it is a quote unquote crime to lie to the FBI. I'm not sure if it's a crime to lie to police. It might be. I don't know if that's a federal or national policy. If you lie to the police about your name, they'll definitely lock you up. But lying to the police about other stuff, I don't know if that's an actual charge. But it's definitely against the law. They will lock you up if you lie to the FBI. Mao Zedong's Combat Liberalism was actually written in 1937. It's quoted here in the 1967 edition of Selected Works of Mao Zedong. And Republic of New Africa, chapter 4 in this book, What is Security, which we went over last week. How y'all doing? Y'all all right? Y'all all right? Okay, looks like y'all all right. Obviously, it's still working. We are going to go on to the next chapter on the question of sexism within the Black Panther Party. Real quick, I'm going to take a swig. More juice, no gin. Chapter 6 of Safiya Bukhari's The War Before, on the question of sexism within the Black Panther Party. Editor's note: Safiya's original introductory paragraph is included here. This essay was published in unedited form in the fall-winter 1993 issue of the Black Panther Black Community News Service. It has also been posted on various websites and is quoted in several books about the Black Panther Party. The BPP had a reputation for sexist politics and mistreatment of women members. Certainly the media encouraged that view. The tendency of white observers to pounce on examples of sexism in Black groups and culture also created the atmosphere in which Safiya was moved to write the essay, to put such criticisms in context and to point out that sexism is no more endemic in oppressed communities than in privileged ones. This piece was initially written as a response to the May 5th, 1993 New York Times op-ed page exchange between former Black Panther member Elaine Brown and Alice Walker, author of The Color Purple. This exchange was the culmination of a running discussion about former party member David Hilliard's book, This Side of Glory. So we got a lot of things at play. We got Alice up in here. We got Elaine, who wrote her own book. We got David Hilliard's book. If you are a faithful subscriber, viewer to Black Liberation Media, then you know that Daruba bin Wahad, a favorite here on the channel, has his criticisms of David Hilliard. There's a bunch of stuff going on here. But anyway, Walker had criticized the party's male leadership as sexist. In what was hyped to be an attack on sexism within the party, Walker seemed to spend more time attacking what she presumed to be the sexuality of the male leadership. She made many allusions to homoeroticism. She had a clear problem with using the terms sexuality and sexism interchangeably. Exchanges like this make it glaringly obvious that it's necessary to put the issue of sexism in the Black Panther Party in its correct perspective. While Alice confuses sexuality and sexism, I will attempt to address the issue of sexism within the Black Panther Party. The error everyone, Black Panther Party supporters and detractors alike, seems to make is to look at the party in a vacuum, separating it from its time and roots. The party came out of the Black community and its experiences. In order to understand the issue of sexism in the party, it is necessary to review the historical experience of Black people in this country, as well as the climate in which the party came into being. This is not to say that there was nothing wrong with the way Black women were treated in the party, but we should not simply decry the role of women in the party. Instead, we should analyze the development of the situation and make the necessary moves to correct it. What then is the Black experience in this country? We were all brought over in the same condition, packed like sardines in the bowels of slave ships. We were herded like cattle to the slave auctions and sold to the highest bidder to be used as workhorses, studs, breeders, and household help. We were defined by our capacities as breeders, studs, and slave laborers. The women were further categorized by how pleasing they were to the eyes of the slave masters. The destruction of our culture, which started with the stealing of our language, religion, and children, was completed when we began to measure our own worth by how many women the Black man could pleasure at a time and how many children we could have. The Black woman worked right alongside the Black man in the field, and she worked in the master's house. The Black man could not defend or protect his family. In most cases, the Black woman was the one who defended or protected the family from the slave master's wrath by any means necessary. Since Black men had been stripped of their manhood in every way but the ability to pleasure women and make babies, the sexual act soon became the standard by which the Black man measured his manhood. Having been deprived of our culture, we began to take on the persona of our slave masters, filling the void of our lost culture with the slave culture that was foisted upon us. This is the root of the sexism that is plaguing our communities today. Unlike the sexism characteristic of the white community, the sexism of the Black community has its basis in racism and self-hate. The division in the Black community between the Black male and the Black female did not just come about on its own. It was carefully thought out and cultivated. After the end of chattel slavery, Black men, for the most part, couldn't get jobs. The Black woman had to be the breadwinner as well as homemaker. This, in conjunction with the already festering sore of having to stand by and watch while the woman was raped, made to bear the master's children, and then made to wet nurse the children of the white woman, was too much for the Black man to handle psychologically. This resulted in the Black man casting the blame for his situation at the feet of the Black woman. As time went on, the love, hate, anger triangle began to manifest itself in the sexism present today in the Black community. Which brings us to 1966 and the founding of the Black Panther Party. Nothing had changed in terms of the quality of life in the Black community. Nothing had changed in terms of racism in this country. We were still slaves in every way except we were no longer bound and shackled. We still didn't have a culture. Our Africanism and sense of identity were gone and had been replaced by Western civilization. We were busy trying to be like the rest of the people in America. We had taken on the persona of sexist America, but with a Black hue. It was into this context that the Black Panther Party was born, declaring that we were revolutionaries and a revolutionary had no gender. Bobby Seale and Huey Newton envisioned the Black Panther Party for self-defense as just that, a community-based organization that sought to defend the community against police brutality and to set an example of revolutionary activism. The membership of the party was recruited from the ghettos of the inner cities. The party itself was founded in Oakland, California, in the spring of 1966 by two black men who came straight out of the ghetto and met on the campus of Merritt College. The party was founded as a response to the rampant episodes of police brutality committed by the notorious Oakland Police Department against the black community. On October 28, 1967, only 1 year after the founding of the party, Huey Newton was incarcerated after an incident in which a police officer was killed and Huey wounded. This, along with the march on the California state capitol at Sacramento with guns, catapulted the party into national prominence. Whatever was going on in the community and society as a whole was reflected in the interaction of the members of the party. The ideology of the party developed out of the struggle of people of African descent in the United States for freedom. This struggle began on the slave ships and continues today. Seen through the prism of Marxism, Leninism, and scientific socialism, the party's ideology was an attempt to overcome the romanticism and idealism that were characteristic of black organizations at the time and replace them with a pragmatic analysis that allowed for social practice as the criterion for truth. Here's my sentence again. Nonetheless, the party had its own unique analysis about which social and economic class was the vanguard of the struggle for black liberation. The party believed that the only group capable of moving the struggle forward was the lumpen proletariat, or lumpen, the brother and sister off the block, the unemployed, last hired and first fired, the hustler, the welfare mother, etc. The party felt that this group was at the bottom rung of the totem pole and had nothing to lose. It was this element that the party recruited from the ghetto and tried to politicize. In its view of what they represented, the party romanticized the lumpen. In defining the work of the party, the leadership looked to other struggles around the world and to Mao Zedong's Red Book, the quotations of Chairman Mao Zedong, for direction. The party's 8 points of attention and 3 main rules of discipline were lifted directly from this book. One of the 8 points was, quote, "Do not take liberties with women," end quote. The recognition of this point and its addition to the catechism of the party was a monumental step forward in addressing the treatment of women. The simple fact that the issue was placed in or on the books was a step forward. Now we had to make it a part of our everyday lives, the everyday lives of the so-called lumpen, who were the majority element of the party. The simple fact that the Black Panther Party had the courage to address the question of women's liberation in the first place was a monumental step forward. In a time when the other nationalist organizations were defining women as barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen, women in the Black Panther Party were working right alongside men, being assigned sections to organize just like the men and receiving the same training as the men. Further, the decisions about what a person did within the ranks of the party were determined not by gender, but by ability. In its brief 7-year history, women had been involved on every level in the party. There were women like Audrea Jones, who founded the Boston chapter of the Black Panther Party, women like Brenda Hyson, who was the officer of the day in the Brooklyn office of the party. There were women like Peaches, who fought side by side with Geronimo Pratt in the Southern California chapter of the party, and Kathleen Cleaver, who was on the Central Committee. There was Sister Rivera, who was one of the motivators behind the office in Mount Vernon, New York. On the other hand, there were problems. Men who brought their sexist attitudes into the organization. Some of the men refused to take direction from women. We had a framework established to deal with that, but many times the framework was not used because of liberalism, cowardice, and fear. The other side of the coin was women who sought to circumvent the principled method of work by using their femininity as a way to achieve rank and stature within the party. They also used their sexuality to get out of work and avoid certain responsibilities. This unprincipled behavior within the party, just as on the streets, undermined the work of other sisters who struggled to deal in a principled manner. Thus, there were three basic evils that had to be confronted: male chauvinism, female passivity, and ultra femininity. The quote, "I'm only a woman" syndrome, unquote. The advent of the women's liberation movement during the late 1960s sought to equate what was happening with white women in this society with the plight of black women. The white women were seeking to change their role in society vis-a-vis the home and the workplace. They sought to be seen as more than just mothers and homemakers. They wanted to be afforded the right to be fully active members of the workplace and to take on whatever role they wanted in society. But our situation was different. We had been working outside the home and supporting our families. We had been shouldering the awesome responsibilities of waging a struggle against racist oppression and economic exploitation since we had been brought to these shores in the slave ships. Our struggle was not a struggle to be liberated so that we could move into the workplace, but a struggle to be recognized as human beings. Give me a minute. Give me another minute, because this juice without gin ain't really working. Not that the gin would work. I think I'm just going to need some plain old clean water. So give me a sec while I take a sip. If I can get the top off. Y'all don't need to see me drinking water. That's why the camera's off. Sexism, or the degeneration of the relationship between the black man and woman into antagonism and brutality, is a byproduct of our history. While I am clearly opposed to the way this history plays out in our community, I am not a feminist. I am a revolutionary. I am a scientific socialist. I believe that we have to struggle on all fronts against those attitudes that threaten to destroy us as a people. It is extremely important that we remember that even though the Black Panther Party had established a built-in process to deal with male chauvinism in its ranks, the members of the party were products of the society in which they lived. We struggled against those tendencies whenever possible, but they were reinforced by the larger society. In order to create a new society, we have to create a new being. We are all products of the society we come from and live within. We have internalized the negativisms of this society. Our every thought and manifestation or way of acting on that thought has been ingrained within us by the circumstances that make up the environment from which we emerge. In changing this society, we have to change how we deal with each other. We have to acknowledge that there is something wrong with how we view each other, how we deal with each other, and how we think of each other. After acknowledging what is wrong, we have to understand how it developed and why it is wrong. Only after we do this will we be in a position to change the thinking and the behavior. If we simply change the color of the oppressor, we have not moved forward. We must change the mindset of the people so that the oppression does not continue. We must cast out the oppressor's culture, including sexism. It is easy to decry from afar the sexism of the leadership of the Black Panther Party without having struggled along with that leadership. If we are truly about the task of revolution, then we must jump into the trenches and struggle together. While the party was dealing with the issue of politically educating its ranks, it was also feeding hungry children, establishing liberation schools, organizing tenants and welfare mothers, and establishing free health clinics. Simultaneously, the Black Panther Party was under attack from the local, state, and federal government. Offices of the party, from California to Louisiana, from Texas to Michigan, all across the country, were under physical attack. Panthers were being killed and imprisoned. We were not theorizing about struggle. We were in constant struggle on every level. Finally, I would like to remind you of two things. First, everybody who is Black is not involved in the Black liberation struggle. Therefore, their critiques of that struggle are not carried out with the motivation of curing the sickness to save the patient. They seize opportunities like the publication of Elaine Brown's and David Hilliard's books to vent their personal beliefs and agendas. Alice Walker has suggested that the male leadership of the party feared being perceived as having homosexual love for each other, whether or not they had actually been lovers, and that this fear accounted for their macho, sexist attitudes towards women. This raises a tantalizing question. Is her assertion an example of people coloring the facts to fit their own leanings? The second point is this. While the primary struggle the Black community faces is against racist oppression and economic exploitation, we must still deal with the problem of male chauvinism and sexism, along with domestic violence in our communities. These problems are not just problems that exist in the Black community, but in the whole of society. The problem for us is that we are having to deal with these issues simultaneously with the primary struggle. The Black Panther Party put into place a mechanism for dealing with this, starting with political education and ending with bringing the responsible parties up on disciplinary charges. We must not be afraid of allowing the old self, rife with the negativisms of this society, to die so that a new, more revolutionary and progressive self can be born. Then and only then do we stand a chance of destroying this oppressive society. It is with this thought in mind that we use the weapon of criticism and self criticism to correct the way we deal with each other. It is through study and practice that we strengthen our own self esteem and gain the courage to challenge chauvinist and sexist attitudes we encounter as we struggle. Finally, it is through our social practice that we set the example to our community and advance the overall struggle. The Black Panther Party may not have completed the task of eradicating sexist attitudes within the party and in the community, but we did bring the problem out in the open and put the question on the floor. As we struggle against our primary enemy, it is extremely crucial that remember that ours is a collective struggle, a struggle for human rights for all our people, men and women. As long as one of us is oppressed, none of us is free. We cannot, as women, struggle side by side with our male comrades for freedom for our people and then be oppressed by our brothers. Our struggle for freedom as a people must mean freedom for all of us. Freedom for men, freedom for women. But the enemy of our people will not wait for us to resolve the questions of gender and sexism. We have to find a way to put all our cards on the table, to struggle together to cure the sickness and save the patient. Those of us who are truly about the work of making revolution and creating a revolutionary culture must be willing to die the death of 1,000 cuts. We must exercise those characteristics of ourselves and traits of the oppressor nation in order to carry out that most important revolution, the internal revolution. This is the revolution that creates a new being capable of taking us to freedom and liberation. As we are creating this new being, we must simultaneously be struggling to defeat racism, capitalism, and imperialism and liberate the Black nation. Let's see, how many notes? Only 8 notes. Footnote number 1, the Black Panther Black Community News Service was a newspaper founded in the spring of 1991. Again, many people think that the Black Panther Party officially ended in 1981. So these are, a collective of Panther veterans. I don't think I'm going to read all of that. She quotes, "In Search of the Black Panther Party, New Perspectives on the Revolutionary Movement," which came out in 2006, Duke University Press, as well as she quotes from Umi Abu Jamal, "We Want Freedom," South End Press, 2004. Yeah, I didn't want to go back and forth between the footnotes. The footnotes are here. Y'all can read the footnotes. But I did see something in the chat about lumpen proletariat. Let's see what this says. It's a German word used by Marx to describe a sector of the working class composed of thieves, swindlers, beggars, and others, the raggedy proletariat. But in the context of the United States, where racism barred many Black people from membership in the working class, the term came to mean those permanently without jobs and without hope of regular employment. In a study guide attributed to the Black Liberation Army, dated 1977-78, lumpen proletariat is defined as the underclass, unemployed, marginally employed, and those who live outside of the law, i.e. the criminal element. The aged, infirm, and disabled are also part of this class because they are marginally employed, therefore not a secure part of the productive process. Those on welfare, Social Security, are also members of this class. Now, this is from a pamphlet put out in 1977-78, defining the lumpen proletariat. And I'm wondering if that's what they're defining the lumpen proletariat as during that time or in the late 60s, early 70s. They quote from Mao Zedong. She quotes from Mao Zedong again. And here's a note. The Black Panther Party split in 71. From that time until 1976, there existed an East Coast and a West Coast Black Panther Party. For the purposes of this writing, the Black Panther Party was destroyed in 1971. That was a lot. And it's 6:17. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of it. But what I want to say is Safiya was an exceptional writer, a wonderful writer, even though she did not consider herself a writer or a theorist. And this is why it's so important for people to write and to communicate and document their thoughts, their history, their activities, etc., etc. But Safiya was an excellent writer, a wonderful thinker, and this was written in 1993. The collection of her writings over a span of years put together in this book, but she did not primarily see herself as a writer. She passes away in Black August 2003. That is 23 years ago. I did not know Safiya well. We talked only occasionally, but I feel completely confident in saying that either had she continued to live through 2026 or lived a little bit longer, I'm more than positive she would have revisited some of her writings, such as this one, and probably maybe revised some of her statements. I'm specifically talking about how she running down the history of Black men and women in this country and leading to the development of the antagonisms between Black men and Black women. I'm quite sure that she would have, because we see in the writings that we do have, just up through this chapter, how much she talked about criticism and self-criticism, and how in her writings she is critical of herself. She was always engaging in the practice of self-reflection. I'm sure she would have continued doing that. And when you're a writer, you sometimes revisit stuff that you've written. She did not consider herself a writer, but I think if she had been with us a little bit longer, she would have most definitely not only reconsidered some things, probably went back and revised some of the things that she had written. So, on that note, I am going to go back. I'm going to go back over here to the chat. Romanticize the lumping. I think that by romanticize the lumping, just the Panther Party thought that they were the key to victory, that they were the key to the vanguard class that should be relied upon, that the majority of their energy should go to organizing. Whereas most Marxist-Leninists, most people who believe in scientific socialism are working on that behalf. They point to the working class as being the most stable class and the one most likely to lead, to quote unquote, to victory. So I'm trying to read at the same time. I think that that's what is meant by romanticizing the lumping, because when you talk about the lumping, if we're talking about the lumping in 2026, we're talking about pimps. We're talking about thieves, when he's the criminal element. These are the people who gonna lead us to victory. You know, what was that? Spooku. When you, I didn't read the book. I watched the movie. When you watch Spooku Sat by the Door, after all of this training, political education, etc., how does the rebellion jump off? They shoot a drug dealer, right? These are the people that we're thinking are going to be down for the revolution, who we can count on, who can lead us to where we need to be led to. So a lot of folks are like, yeah, I don't know about all that. But, in an attempt to include all black folks, I think that's why the party had that analysis. Yes, the underbelly of society, the lumpen proletariat. Hmm. All right. Don't tell me Zinzabel came here. Yeah, she came in late. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Zen. All right. So I am going to take a 2-minute break, and then we are going to get into Sanyika Shakur's. All right. Y'all stay with me. All righty. Let's see here. We are going to now go into Sanyika Shakur's. I've lost track at the moment which chapter this is, but it's, in terms of the number, what the chapter is. But it's called On Correct Terminology and Spellings En Route to Conscious Development and Socialist Revolution. And this is from his book, his last book, Stand Up, Struggle Forward. Holler real quick. All right, Chidi Macha, peace out. Peace out. Thank you for coming. Let's see. Can you live? Anyway. All right. So it's available out there in the world. My understanding is, oh God, this type is so small. It's available out there in the world somewhere as a PDF, but you should also purchase the book if you have not already. And I was hoping to give you something to look at other than my beautiful face, but this typeset is so small. So I was hoping y'all could read along with me. I don't know. But we about to see. We gonna make it do what it do, as we say. All right. Try that. There has been some dialogue generated recently that has come to focus on the way the New African Independence Movement, or NAIM, uses certain spellings, particular words, phrases, and slogans to distinguish, apply energy, weight, and clarity to the ongoing and ever increasing need for sharper, more critical words of power to describe the socio-economic phenomena of national oppression. What we'd like to do here is go through a few of these in use now, which are generally accepted as a standard for cadres of Naim, but may not be so obvious to others. And two, the thing we'd like to do is open up a deeper line of dialogue in this regard in hopes of developing a unified theory of comprehensive terminology to enhance the depth, breadth, and momentum of revolutionary consciousness as we build for People's War, or Vita wa Watu in Kiswahili. In our struggle to regain independence as a self determining people with dignity and pride, we understand that we must have a national identity, a name, one that is neither given by our oppressors nor predicated on a racialist color. We must have a nationality as a prerequisite if we are serious about forging the socio-economic constructs of a state by which to govern the nation or nationality, i.e., the people's citizens. We necessarily begin at the beginning. We know we are descended from peoples forcefully removed from the west coast of the African continent. We know we haven't fallen from the sky. We also have sure knowledge of the reasons we were brought here. But Africa is a continent of many people and not a homogeneous nation. It isn't now, nor was it when the predators and destroyers came, and probably hadn't been since the early days of life. On the continent, there are nations and nationalities. There are various languages, cultures, politics, religions, and customs. So, we know that when the predators and destroyers came, they found many different people. We know they made deals with some to work in concert against others. It was a socio-economic arrangement, a class alliance, supply and demand. We often heard growing up by Americans who wished to distance themselves from colonialism that, quote, your own people sold you into slavery, end of quote. Well, this is not altogether true, since essentially we'd never really all been one people, certainly not by the time the predators came, and even among those of the same nation, there were class divisions and other contradictions. What we all were, however, was darker in complexion by far than the Europeans or the Arabs who came assailing us. And thus it was this apparent difference that they seized upon to make us one people, black first, then African as a whole. Much like capitalism is now making all Spanish-speaking people into Latinos and or Hispanics, or how colonialism made all indigenous people into Indians. But underneath this generalization were nationalities and nations. We knew this, certainly. For had you asked a captured woman who she was, say in 1580, she would not have said, I'm black, nor would she have said, I'm African. She'd have said, I'm Akan, or I'm Fante, or Hausa, Igbo, Fulani, Ewe, Yoruba, etc. It was these various peoples, hailing from numerous nations and nationalities, that were brought together under colonialism and transported to the so called New World to be utilized as a proletariat for the new European nations being built on stolen and occupied lands. By dint of brutal transport and collusion, we were brought together under conditions less than human and barely tolerable. By our own internal dynamics and self motion, we essentially combined in these conditions to become a new people, no longer Igbo, Fulani, Ewe, Fante, or Yoruba, but African still. Our cultures weren't so much destroyed as they were transformed. We survived and remade ourselves on the residue of self consciousness, self motion, in a 100% hostile environment. Of this, we have sure knowledge that from Los Angeles to New York and all areas in between, New Africans share the same culture our ancestors forged in the cauldron of old colonialism. You know how the bourgeois media likes to parrot Boy Bush by saying, quote, 911 changed everything, end of quote. Well, in actuality, colonialism is really what changed everything, really. For just as we became a new African nation in North America, indigenous nations were being decimated, and a new European nation state called America was coming into existence. This is how nations are really formed, how nationalities come to be. They don't mysteriously fall ready made from the sky. It is human nature to bring into existence new unities, nations, nationalities, based on need or greed. So while we may have come here as Fulani, Ewe, Igbo, etc., this is not who we are today. While simultaneously, the Fulani, Ewe, and Igbo people still exist in Africa. The reality is, however, we can't go back to the past. We'd be insincere running around Oakland or Brooklyn talking about I'm Yoruba, I'm Hausa, because we are not anymore. We have our own customs now, our own culture too. And even though we are saddled with the colonial language, we have our own ways of using it to suit our needs. We now have our own set of contradictions that are unique to our particular social development here. And yet, we are still African. Though we've come to understand that being African wasn't enough to describe our particular experience and social development here, nor was it sufficient to point us in the direction of where we need to go. That is, when and where we enter again onto the world stage of nations. We keep emphasizing nationality and nation because if you think about it, meditate on it, we can't enter the world community of nations as minorities, as blacks, or as African Americans. That would be absurd. It would be akin to us going out repping America, the US government, capitalism, imperialism, and all that this entails. We'd be bourgeois American nationalists. And don't fool yourself. You'd still be a nationalist. You'd just be a bourgeois nationalist. That is, you'd be a representative of the new unity that America is under its ruling class, with all that this entails. So we emphasize nationality and nation in order to bring the reality out that it is a choice one has, whether to side with the colonizer or to struggle with the oppressed, which is essentially to struggle against oppression, against U.S. capitalism, imperialism, against being colonized and prevented from being yourself. I'm going to read that again for the ADOS and FBA crew. That is, you'd be a representative of the new unity that America is under its ruling class with all that this entails. So we emphasize nationality and nation in order to bring the reality out that it is a choice one has, whether to side with the colonizer or to struggle with the oppressed, which is essentially to struggle against oppression, against U.S. capitalism, imperialism, against being colonized and prevented from being yourself. Or as El Hajj Malik El Shabazz Omawali, Brother Malcolm X said, don't be fighting to get back on the plantation. We have chosen New African as our nationality because it adequately defines our experience. It brings the reality of our transformation and new unity right down to where it needs to be. It also affords us an identity of our own, out and away from that given to us by our oppressors. Quote, New African reflects our identity as a nation and as a nation and a nation and a people desiring self-determination. New Africans have been called colored Americans, American Negroes, Black Americans, and Afro Americans. New African reflects our purpose as we desire freedom, self-determination, and independence. By stating we are New Africans, we clarify we want to be independent from the American empire. We want land and national liberation. We no longer want the ruling class of the American empire to determine our political, economic, social, cultural affairs. We also have the New African Declaration of Independence, the New African Creed, and the Code of Umoja, written and ratified in 1968, with a subsequent review completed by the People's Center Council on November 3, 2007. These lofty documents point to the reality of our national existence. Comrade Brother Owusu Yaki Yakubu, also known Brother Yaki Atiba Shana James Sales. Comrade pointed out on many occasions that, quote, the nation exists both in potentiality and actuality, it's just not free. The reason we need to get past the usage of labels like Black and African American is because they only serve to distort our reality. These labels confuse and misdirect the colonialism of the U.S. into an everything's better now fog of narcolepsy. Let me check on y'all real quick. Yep, I see y'all still there. All right. Another way this is done is by calling our experience here from 1619 to 1865 mere slavery, when of course it was much worse, more complex, and binding than any slavery could ever be. Saying our condition was mere slavery is an easy way out. It is to say slavery was abolished in 1865 with the ratification of the 13th Amendment, which then leads to the 14th Amendment to make new African citizens, thereby violating our human right to self-determination, but also liquidating the reality of our nation by incorporating us into the empire as minority citizens, Negroes, Blacks, colored African Americans, as those who cannot govern themselves, whose productive forces are harnessed by the empire for its own interests. What they never want us to understand is that we are a nation inside the belly of the beast. No, this reality must always be distorted, disguised, laughed at, slapped away, or crushed. In a way, our finding and usage of the correct terminology to facilitate an overstanding of colonialism comes as a means to combat the enemy's mass distortions of our reality. Yes, this is true. You see, the conscious instinctively go east when the enemy insists the right way is west. We refuse to move along its path. We stop, stand our ground, and struggle against the stream because we know our truths. Our interests stand in stark contrast to the enemy's. So we dig in search of the tools we'll need to end its life. And it isn't and isn't that what it does too in order to oppress us? We're in the same war. We're just on different sides. Just as we are not black, Negro, or African American, our condition was not slavery. Which is not to say our condition didn't have the outward appearance of slavery, nor are we trying to take anything away from the awful conditions which our ancestors endured. We are saying that slavery, like those minority labels, is a distortion of the facts. In order to fully apprehend reality, we cannot use the deliberately faulty tools given us by our enemies. When using their analyses of our condition, we'll get their results, which favor their distortions and continuing oppression of us as minorities or, quote, disenfranchised second class citizens, end quote. How can anyone be disenfranchised when they've never been enfranchised? Oh, but we were enfranchised as a colony. Like individuals can own a McDonald's, but have to go to Ronald McDonald College in order to learn how to run the business in accordance with the overall standards of established order of the corporation. The same food, same colors, same uniforms, same culture of the corporation permeates all. Same recipe. But now check this out. Wouldn't real disenfranchisement mean to leave the corporate orbit to get free of it? That's what we should be struggling for. Disenfranchisement. No. We're looking for correct terminology, for ways out. We're not struggling to be enfranchised, but we want true disfranchisement and not some fake paperweight Bantustan flag freedom. We've been told that being born here makes us Americans. We reject that foolishness. We are more apt to ride with the sobering words of Malcolm X. Being born here doesn't make you an American. Why, that's like saying if a cat has kittens in the oven, that makes them biscuits. You might want to read that one again. Also, when Malcolm said, just because you're sitting at the table, that don't mean you're a diner. Until you get a plate with food on it, you're not partaking in the dining. You're not a diner. You're just there at the table. Having made the points we have, we'll move this along, though not without a quote from Comrade Brother Owusu Yaki Yakubu. The native, the Negro, the colored, the black, and the African American have no identity apart from that given them by the colonizer. That is, not unless they resist colonialism, which entails 1. Their maintenance of an identity that is separate and distinct from that of the colonized and from that given them by the colonizer, and 2, they begin to develop a new identity through the process of decolonization. Though having remained separate and distinct, colonized people aren't who they were prior to colonization, and they can't return to the past. Colonization has arrested their independent development, distorted who they are, and now they must become a new people during the process by which they regain their independence. The new people need a new, more critical, and radical set of words, of terminology, to bring the arrested development of our independence into sharper focus. A focus so clear as to give us the ability to read the earth signs and guideposts towards national independence and socialism. The struggle, lest we forget, is not just against capitalism and imperialism, but also for socialism. We are not trying to get a seat at the table or an office in the whitest house. That's called reform. That's called collusion, collaboration, and neo-colonialism. That's not our bag. We suggest, we suggest strongly that all new Africans seek to obtain, study, and meditate on the following documents: the New African Declaration of Independence, the New African Creed, and the Code of Umoja, which is the Republic of New Africa's national constitution. These, of course, are the general laws, ethics, and obligations of New African nationals. Individual collectives and orgs in the Naim will necessarily have their own particular bylaws, codes of ethics, and points of authority to frame their practice vis-a-vis the masses and other collective orgs. Nonetheless, we all function under the general objective laws established by the provisional government. What tends to bother us is when comrades from other movements and nationalities who've struggled with us in various capabilities do interviews or in their writings refer to us as African Americans or blacks. And we're not talking about the average comrades on the street who have no real clue about our ideology. No, we mean comrades who, in some instances, were captured with some of our nationals. It's not cool to do that. We feel that if you want to be, quote, politically correct, end quote, then side with the revolutionaries and not with the distortionists. We are New Africans. In 1968, over 500 New African nationalists signed the New African Declaration of Independence and named our nation the Republic of New Africa. We feel when comrades do that, they are going along with our oppression, at least some form of it. They are conscious, they know better. And two, we have to step up our ideological struggle to deepen the correct usage of our national identity. Even in low tides, we must stand firm and push forward. Now, before I continue, let me jump in here real quick and say this. A lot of people, and that's one of the reasons why it's important to read works like Sanyika's. A lot of people have problems with the term New African. I had a problem with it the first time I heard it. People have clowned us. Well, I'm an old African. Okay, fine, whatever. If you look at what he's saying about the social development of our people in this country, that's what is most important. Yes, 500 black nationalists came together at the height of the Black Power movement at one of the Black Power or Black government conferences. Yes, they declared we are independent. Yes, they came up with a declaration of independence that was signed by Queen Mother Moore and others. Yes, they said we're going to name ourselves New African and we're going to identify our territory and call it New Africa. Yes, all of that happened. But when people talk about the social development of us, black folks, over here within the belly of the beast, I think that is what needs to be the focus. Because black people have always seen ourselves as separate from white folks, white Americans. We've always seen ourselves as a nation, even if we did not use those words. Martin Delany talked about it in the late 1800s, right? At one point, we referred to ourselves as Bilalians, or some folks referred to us as Bilalians. You look at social media now, they call us Solani, whatever that means. We always trying to come up with a different name, but the process remains the same. The development of African people within this country as a separate and distinct people. New Africa and New African, Provisional Government Republic of New Africa, Code of Umoja, New African Creed, New African Declaration of Independence, New African Independence Movement is the most organized around that concept we have been. But if you want to change the name, change the name. Don't get hung up in the name. There's a brother by the name of Oscar Brown Jr., who was a jazz performer. His father, Oscar Brown Sr., in the 1940s and 50s, was a member of a movement called the 49th Staters. The United States, the empire, has quote unquote 50 states. Alaska and Hawaii were the last two. So at one point, it was only 48 states. Alaska and Hawaii are recent developments within the last 50, 60, 70 years. The 49th Staters was a movement of black people to have one state to themselves. I don't know what it was going to be called. I'm not interested in what it was going to be called. It's the idea that we are separate. We are a nation. That is what Sanyika is talking about. And it is this chapter which is talking about correct terminology. The terminology that we use to convey that idea, that thought, that ideology, that political line that we are a separate nation and a colonized nation that should not be absorbed into America, but free of America. All right, I'm going to shut up now and get back to the lecture at hand. Some terms and spellings. 1. We, meaning people in the New African Independence Movement or NAIM, we, as a rule, capitalize the W in we to emphasize the collective mass importance of the people. We overstand that capitalism and the degenerate culture that inherently flows from it incites, facilitates, and rewards rank individualism. It fosters the me, look out for number one, and I am more important than all of you mentality. In America, for example, one individual can own 10 or 100 supermarkets and feel or have no obligation to feed one hungry person. In fact, owners have had poor people prosecuted to the full extent of bourgeois law for taking food, or homeless people for panhandling on his or her premises. Individualism, gluttonous consumerism, and naked greed are the inherent hallmarks of capitalism. And let me also add, people can be prosecuted if they dumpster dive, take the food, if they're at a restaurant and they give leftover food away, they can be prosecuted. When these various markets and stores have food that reaches a certain expiration date, they'll dump it and lock the dumpster so that you can't go in and get the food. Individualism, gluttonous consumerism, and naked greed are the inherent hallmarks of capitalism. We necessarily reflect this. Necessarily reflect this, and thus capitalize our W's. He probably means we reject this and capitalize our W's and simultaneously decapitalize, cut the head off the I when it's used in a normative case singular of the first person pronoun, or as the word used by a speaker or written in mentioning herself, himself. In other words, it's little I, big we. We feel that doing so not only keeps us focused, but is also instructive to our readers. Some comrades have decapped their whole names to further illustrate their submergence in the people, such as a Bell Hooks or Dream Hampton, possibly. Number 2, we spell Africa with a K as opposed to a C because, as comrade brother Sundiata pointed out, the New African Independence Movement spells African with a K as an indicator of our cultural identification with the African continent and because African linguists originally used K to indicate the C sound in the English language. We also use the K in our national identity to illustrate our break with and necessary distinction from our colonizers. The K represents resistance, rebellion, and our need for critical distance from the normative constraints of colonialism. Number three, we by and large decap the A in America for several reasons. We write America with a lowercase a. Principal among these is the fact that the colonial state is an illegal settler government empire fastened by dint of genocide and colonial violence, onto the backs of indigenous nations and land and other internal colonies. We overstand the U.S. as a virtual, nay, as an actual prison house of nations, which are culturally and economically held in check by a complicit garrison population of citizens who believe in American exceptionalism, manifest destiny, and the inherent inferiority of everyone but themselves. These Americans are fortified ideological shock troops holding the genocidal quilt of U.S. imperialism together with boundless acts of blind ass patriotism and loyalty. Whew, that's a hell of a sentence. We reject that and refuse to give this or any empire any acknowledgement as a place of peace, liberty, and democracy. America is not so much a place deserving a capital letter at its helm as it is an experience, like a wild and horrifying ride at an amusement park. Only this ride is more lethal, 1,000 times more harmful, and totally mind warping. Quote, the ride of a lifetime, end quote, where whole nations are strapped in for the violent twists and turns of empire. The more we try to get off, the faster it goes, the higher it climbs, the deeper it plunges. Welcome to the Terror Dome. We are not in the habit of giving respect to those who don't respect us. Decap the A. Might I remind you, Sanyika Shakur, formerly known as Monster Kody, graduated from the 12th grade, the 6th grade at the age of 12. That was it. That was it. No more schooling until juvenile hall, juvenile camps, and prison. Number 4, we use a K or 3 Ks in America, as we do in the word country, when referring to America and its capitalist allies, to emphasize our awareness that it is the prototype, the archetype type of the Ku Klux Klan. Its overall reactionary, racialist, and theological schematic is clannish. And just because the state employs functionaries from its colonies means nothing. The ruling class is a seething cauldron of alabaster menace, sitting as it does atop the planet in a predator's pose, ready to pounce on the next crime to make a profit. The pathological bourgeoisie is the brain trust of every two-bit supremacist on the planet. The Klan foremost among them. We think it was the Amazon Butch Lee who said, America is what Nazi Germany wanted to be. We agree and would go on to add that the ruling class is who the Klan aspires to be like and keep in power. So, we necessarily associate the two in our writings because it keeps us focused on the fundamental contradiction in our way. Would you want to integrate into a Klan society? A society that has never, not once, declared the Ku Klux Klan as a terrorist organization. Number 5, some of us younger comrades will use a capital O on our or you on us when referring to new African people. This is but a particular style used by those of us in the trenches doing ideological combat on a daily basis. It is a good concept to promote the Unitarian ideal. However, it often brutalizes the written text by detracting from the smooth flow of a sentence, not to mention being a virtual nightmare for some of our comrades who help in transcribing our work. And two, we'll often use these caps this way to stand to the left of those who've come before us. However, all ideas are not of equal value, and any theory which cannot stand up to objective reality is dead. While we don't think the concept dead, we do, however, feel it's not practical. For as long as we wrap up the W and cut the head off that big ass I, we'll be fine. Number 6. As revolutionary nationalists, we are without question anti-racists. We work diligently to exclude all language and practice that promotes or perpetuates the false social construct of race. We first of all get past this by understanding who concocted this foolishness. Oh, yeah, it was the same class of predators who constantly told us to go west. It's the right way, the only way out. No bet. Trust and believe when they say go west. Your surest path is in any other direction. Let's check in with the wise counsel of Comrade Brother Awusu Yaki Yakubu. Racism is used to justify and facilitate the exploitation of peoples, and it's based on the false belief that humanity is divided into a plurality of races that stand in relation to each other as inferior or superior based on physical and or cultural differences. There are no races, only peoples and groups of peoples, united and distinguished by common history, social development, habits, interests, etc. Sometimes we call all of this nationality or ideology. To be anti-racist is, first of all, not to hold the false belief in an alleged plurality of races. To be against racism is to combat all beliefs and practices that facilitate the exploitation of people, particularly when such exploitation is supported by the social construction of race. Let's see. How y'all doing over there? How y'all doing over there? Okay. Obviously. Okay. Alrighty. I see y'all still in the chat going at it. And I'm going to keep going at it too. What we do is stop calling ourselves black. This goes along with the false construct and perpetrates the erroneous belief, not to mention the colonial relationship of oppressed and oppressor. To say black is to promote the plurality of race, the black race, white race, etc. People have national identities. We are not racist, so why promote racist beliefs? Now, we are not naive either. While we know the science behind the division of humanity into races is without question junk science and crackpot engineering, we also understand that regular folks ain't got that memo. The masses of all colonies inside the beast still function under this guise. And so, while we understand it's not real, people are still quite willing to kill and die for it. But we have to lead the way of decolonizing, disenfranchising, and deprogramming them. So, race is both false and to an extent real. Let's go over to the dictionary and see what it says about the two words in question. We're using a 2006 Webster's Integrated Dictionary and Thesaurus. Black, adjective of the darkest color, like coal or soot, having dark colored skin and hair, especially Negro, without light, dirty, evil, wicked, sad, dismal, sullen. We could go on with the description, but it only gets worse. Let's flip over to the word white, same source, and see what we find. White, adjective, of the color of milk or pure salt, stainless, pure, bright, light colored, as of Caucasoid skin, color of anything white, innocent. Well, we know these are wholly inadequate terms to use in referring to people, any people. And we overstand too that black was sort of necessary in the 1960s to distinguish the revolutionaries from the neo-colonialist Negroes. However, we also know that it was insufficient and should now be put to rest. Along with white, we are more concerned with one's politics than we are with anyone's complexion. We unite with those whose practice and sincerity bears them out to be worthy. We are birthed into this world with no control over our complexions, pigmentation, our nationality, and our politics, however, we can choose. That's the basis of the get down. The content of character, practice, and the company one keeps are always the surest indicators of who's who. In our writings, speaking, and organizing, we make that national distinction between us and Americans based not on race, black or white, as if we were all Americans with just different complexions, who suffer or prosper as a result of a few bad men or women in office. No, we clarify the reality based on oppressor and oppressed nations, on capitalism versus socialism, on national independence versus colonialism. As soon as we fall into the trap of race, we lose momentum. We stop pushing our line and start pushing the colonizer's line. We heighten awareness by exposing the falsehoods. The contradictions are plentiful, and there is no shortage of angles for us to attack. The fundamental contradiction is not race, but national oppression, with fat ass U.S. imperialism sitting on our backs, preventing us from moving in our own national interests. The struggle is to destroy this overbearing bully, to get free, and in the process, rebuild ourselves into productive people who are about world revolution and socialism. Number 7, we are anti-patriarchal, which entails us being against all forms of male supremacy and suppression of women. Women hold up half the sky, and in most oppressed nations, it's more like three quarters. This is especially true in New Africa. We necessarily combat any and all forms of gender oppression. While we'd like to say such oppression is a result of capitalist economics, that would unfortunately not be true. We believe and have sure knowledge that men turned women and children into the first oppressed populations on the planet long before capitalism appeared on the scene. Patriarchy is a backwards, oppressive, and exploitative form of social and personal relations that infects and warps the activity of otherwise progressive or potentially revolutionary women and young girls. So, what we do is be proactively corrective in not only our practice, but also in our writings and our speech. I'm going to read that again. We are anti patriarchal, which entails us being against all forms of male supremacy and suppression of women. Women hold up half the sky, and in most oppressed nations, it's more like three quarters. This is especially true in New Africa. We necessarily combat any and all forms of gender oppression. While we'd like to say such oppression is a result of capitalist economics, that would unfortunately not be true. We believe and have sure knowledge that men turned women and children into the first oppressed populations on the planet long before capitalism appeared on the scene. Gotta watch those explosive P's. Patriarchy is a backwards, oppressive, and exploitative form of social and personal relations that infects and warps the activity of otherwise progressive or potentially revolutionary women and young girls. So, what we do is be proactively corrective in not only our practice, but also in our writings and our speech. Male centered language runs rampant through most cultures, as does practice. Have you ever stopped to ponder any of the words we think are normal? Words like manpower, man hours, manhole, mankind. And these are but a few of the more flagrant ones. Hold on. Think about organized religion too. What effect does it have on women and young girls, on boys and men for that matter, who feel an inherent sense of entitlement due to its unflinching patriarchy? For in every one of the major religions, God supposedly only picked men, in one, his son, to be prophets or saviors. The last person God spoke with or communicated to or called upon to lead was a man. One major religion takes the mother totally out of the equation, making for only the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Some others offer virgins as rewards for martyrdom, owned and possessed even in paradise. The major organized religions are, in fact, good old boy networks that relegate women and children to near chattel status as submissives and victims of men. It is as if, in order to get into heaven, paradise, or whatever land of pleasure and ease one believes in, women and children must have been good submissives and supporters, mere bit players to their husbands, brothers, and fathers, or loyal to their priest, imam, or rabbi. Well, we reject that. We refuse to see women as inferiors or objects and needing and having to have the guards, protection, or sympathy of men in order to get along or to get to some far off paradise. Fuck that. Amen and a women. We believe and have sure knowledge that women possess the very same potential as any man to change the world, perhaps even more so. We know women can govern, guide, lead, fight, struggle, conspire, shoot, theorize, and everything else any man can do, and have done so. And yet women have been so oppressed by men that they are very distrustful and suspicious, and we say rightly so. This was written in 2013, mind you, long before people started talking about the bear or the man. But we understand that unity of purpose, of need, and necessity grows out of steadfast practice and righteousness. Simultaneously, we understand that women and children need and must have a military strategy of their own, must always stand ready. We recognize this is true because revolutions, too, can and have turned into good old boy networks. To be cautious is to be aware of all this. Be mindful of social relations that do harm to the unintended, to those we must unite with, to those who are the most oppressed. It is about being accountable and responsible. That's revolutionary. What we do is change words like mankind to humankind, history to social development or our story, or to emphasize that it is a lie told by our colonizers. We'll spell it as his story, as in male centered and just his version. Women in the collectives, orgs, and movement will use her story, which is perfectly natural, really, given how much of the social development of women, especially Amazons, has been manhandled, buried, distorted, or lied about. We encourage women to do the damn thing. Write on. When we write, we need to be mindful that the nation ain't he or him, not made up of just males. Use the slash mark to always include both genders. And these are but the rudiments, mere seeds beneath the snow. We'll necessarily build on these as we grow and develop, and as women, Amazons, push out front and exert themselves so their own reality is widely representative of the whole. Learn how they wish to be related to by then. Number 8, we are against homophobia, but deeper still, we are about combating heterosexism. See, homophobia, the irrational fear of someone because of their sexual orientation, is but one side of the equation. One can be in fear and use this to run away or avoid the natural in order to make themselves feel better. But this will only give rise to homophobia's evil twin, heterosexism, which is not just fear of, but oppression and exploitation of someone based on their sexual orientation. It points to a degenerate set of politics, for it always comes back to our politics. Our politics are revolutionary, naturally against oppression, and yet here we are oppressing someone based on their natural self. If we kept our politics in command, we'd know better. We'd do better. We need to be clear and focused here because people will try to get by on this. If we are going to be the message we bring, then we have to stand firm on our politics. People, collectives, and orgs will profess that they are not homophobic, have no fear of gays, lesbians, bisexuals, or transgendered people, and yet go right on to practice staunch heterosexism by having not one post in their orgs held by gays, lesbians, bisexuals, or transgender people. All those in any position of power are so called straight people. To us, any org claiming to be revolutionary or representative of the people that doesn't actively recruit, promote, and cultivate gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgender people slash cadres is not really pushing a revolutionary line for change and freedom, let alone socialism. They are perpetuating the backwardness of the bourgeoisie. Hell, we can hardly say that anymore since even reactionaries have repealed their policies. Heterosexist policies. We are concerned about a person's character, politics, practice, and the company they keep. Now, you do know that people assert and assume that because of someone's sexuality, their character is poor. Y'all clear on that part, right? Okay. We are concerned about a person's character, politics, practice, and the company they keep. not their complexion, gender, or sexual orientation. The question is and should always be, are they down for revolution? Are they with us or against us? Do they over do they understand that we are about armed struggle? We are not those to sit in, love in, cry in, or hold hands and sing, "We shall overcome." That's not us. We are about armed struggle. So in our writings, we don't just condemn homophobia, we also shine the light on heterosexism, on so called straight domination of things, as if being hetero is any indication of being always right or somehow real. Give us a break. What's going to guide us is revolutionary consciousness informed by our political line. And the fact of the matter is, if you're not ready to let consciousness guide you, truly you're not ready for revolution, i.e., complete change. Number 9, it looks like we're coming to the end. And let me also just say real quick, heterosexism, it's not just so much as the promotion of people who are straight. It is the belief that there is only one way to be, that there is only one form of acceptable sexuality, and that is heterosexual. I didn't see that in his breakdown, so I just wanted to throw that in there. Number 9, we recognize concentration camps, prisons in the U.S. as tools of colonial violence used to further arrest the development of national independence. Concentration camps, like the courts, the bourgeois law, and the political police, are all tied into the matrix of imperialism. For settlers, these places are prisons. For colonial subjects, citizens of the internal nations, these are concentration camps. Intentional, political, containing, and genocidal. In a monopoly capitalist society with a deeply entrenched ruling class, such as exists here in America, no, no facet of its system is beyond the pale of economic pressure and control. That is, all oppressive parts related to the whole are subject to the scrutiny of the ruling class. In other words, they serve the needs of the beast, profit and disposal. Everything worthwhile is tied in some way to the profit motive margin of monopoly capitalism. Concentration camps in this regard are major holdings for the bourgeoisie because they serve two purposes. They pin up potential social dynamite. They pin up potential social dynamite, those most likely to resist and rebel and revolt. And then they also exploit this same legion as industrial laborers in the camps. But deeper still, this system also gives jobs to settlers who work in those camps as guards, managers, nurses, doctors, counselors, etc. We spell concentration camps with a K for the same reasons we use the K's in America, court, and country. It's all clannish. And so it is we've come to the end of these notes. We hope to have brought some light and reason to some of the things we are about, that we struggle around, and that we tend to bring to completion. We are under no illusions, have no thoughts of anything being easy or quick. We are committed for the duration, come what may. We shall enter with our heads up, back straight, focused, and conscious. We urge you to join the revolution and get down for the freedom you so richly deserve. We have nothing to lose but our chains. And so, 7:26 p.m. I'm actually 4 minutes early. So that concludes the chapters for today's readings of Safiya Bukhari's The War Before and Sanyika Shakur's Stand Up, Struggle Forward. I think, let me go back real quick. Is there a way to do this? No. Is there a way to, oh my goodness. So, I'll deal with that later. I'm not sure. I can't see it at the moment. How many pages or how many chapters are left in Safiya and Sanyika's books? There are only 2 Sundays left in August, but just because August ends doesn't mean I'm going to stop. I'm committed to finishing these books. I'm committed to finishing these books here on Rootwork on Black Liberation Media. So basically, I'm going to keep reading every Sunday until we get through these books. And one reason, of course, is because I'm committed to it. But I also, in my mind, I extend Black August into September, because September 9th is when the brothers in Attica rebelled, coming off of their recognition of the murder, the assassination, of George Jackson. And then September 14th, when the brothers were murdered by the state, the governor of New York sending in state troopers to massacre the brothers who had taken over the prison and tortured those who were remaining. So in my mind, I extend Black August into September. And so, like I said, I'm going to continue reading these books until I finish, however long that takes. So you will be welcome to join me here on Sundays you are welcome to continue enjoying my melodious voice and we finish these books. Black August and Red September. Black August, yep. Okay, well, good. I'm glad you will be here. I appreciate it. Hey, Snowman, how you bees? Thank you. Hello, Will Red, how are you? Hey, Jamon. It is all clannish. One big happy clan. Mm-hmm. Really? Yeah, okay. Hey, are you still hanging out after I clowned you earlier? Thank you for not being mad, comrade. Thank you for having a good sense of humor, comrade. I appreciate that. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. It's 7:29. I'm gonna get y'all out of here early, on time. Thank you so much for hanging with a sister on this Sunday. Again, share the link. If you came in late, go back and listen from the beginning. Like the video, share the link, subscribe to Black Liberation Media, subscribe to Rootwork. Continue to honor your commitments that you made for Black August. And if you didn't make any commitments, go ahead on and make some. You got about 2 more weeks. You can get them in. Know what I'm saying? And I don't have any Monday afternoon or evening Rootworks where I interview people scheduled. Pretty much I'm just going to deal with, until I can find some people, I'm going to deal with reading from Safiya and Sanyika's books for August on Sundays. So thank you again so much for joining me. You all take care of yourselves. You stay safe out there. And I will catch you all on the next one. All right? Peace.
Nothing in Deborah Jones's formative years could have prepared her for life in the US organization. Like many of her generation, she was Black and proud before the phrase became popular. She believed, and still believes, in the principles for which the organization stood. But her life took a horrific turn on Mother's Day 1970, leaving her in trauma and in silence. In this never-before-told account, Deborah Jones's inspiring story is told. What We Stood For: The Story of a Revolutionary Black Woman, by Deborah Jones and Thandisizwe Chimurenga, is the compelling and harrowing memoir of one woman's experiences in a leading Black power organization.
Black Liberation Media is a collective of Black and African organizers, journalists, academics, and media personalities serving Black and African masses seeking to further grow in their understanding of themselves, their histories, and the African world through entertainment and news. Please continue to like, subscribe, and donate to the channel so we can further serve you and liberate our people. You can also go to blkliberationmedia.org, get some merchandise, and also become a Patreon member and a member from the YouTube. Please do what you can, share, and show your love as we will show ours for you. Black Liberation Media.